Before I begin on this story, I need to mention that this isn't the typical scary story where someone was stalked or I was almost murdered, but my wife and I were harassed by a crazy-ass landlord over the course of a long time. That's my story. So let me go ahead and get started. This happened while my wife and I were renting at a manufactured home community in 2022. We were only there for a year through the end of our lease when we moved out due to issues with the landlord, which I'll get into in a moment. For some context, the manufactured home has a heating system that operates using propane gas, which we were responsible for paying. Issues with our heating system not running regularly were noticed early in January of 2022. The heating would come on but acted differently. We contacted our propane supplier to make sure the amount of gas that we had in our tanks was good and that it wouldn't affect the way the heating system works. My wife reached out one bitter cold Friday afternoon to the on-site community manager, Nancy. It was to advise her that we were having issues with the heating system. Nancy immediately began scolding my wife for having called late in the day to report this and stated that she had let all of her maintenance men go home early today. This was between 2:45 to 3 p.m. and the office was open until 5 p.m. My wife apologized, and then Nancy said, "You should be sorry." Nancy did then apologize to my wife after calling back after speaking to maintenance saying she was having a bad day. Nancy sent a maintenance man out. His name was Ron, who had the furnace running, but then he left as soon as it had started running. We noticed it was doing the same thing, so my wife then had to reach back out to Nancy right away, and then Ron returned. Now, the first time Ron was there, my wife had asked him not to judge the way our place looked with the boxes and bags that we didn't get a chance to finish putting away yet. He didn't respond. In the meantime, while he was at our place, Nancy had called my wife and began yelling at her about the way our place looked with boxes and bags throughout the home, and that we had 5 months before her injury to straighten up. She said that she saw a video of our place taken while maintenance was there. Nancy told her we would be evicted within 30 days if the place wasn't cleared up by Monday, as she would be coming by to inspect it. However, she threw out 3 different days: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then right back to Monday. She also demanded that I get outside to shovel since it wasn't done yet, and since I was home to answer the door for Ron. My wife had told her I was working, but she didn't get to say that I'm working from home. Please note that I was teleworking at the time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I did go out and shovel after my shift after Ron left. Maintenance had left us with space heaters, and they said they'll be there Monday morning to fix the issue with the heating. My wife asked Nancy if Ron could come through the back door since it's right next to the heating system, so that they wouldn't have to trample snow and liquid all over the floor, especially with her being on crutches. She then snapped at her, saying he'll be coming to the front door. This second conversation had my wife in tears on the phone, as this was while Ron had been there. Ron needed to check in the office if the correct part needed was available, but it wasn't, and he would need to pick it up on Monday. He did return with 3 space heaters from the office to loan out until Monday, and he said that he usually suggested to other residents about having them. He did say that he would be back on Saturday morning with us, and he did at around 10 a.m. We were doing okay. This is some extra information since it was brought up in the recent conversations with Nancy. The first night we moved in, we had found bugs that had us concerned and appalled. They were coming out from the kitchen counter and cabinet area, and we only saw them very late at night. We didn't even bring any food boxes in here yet, nor anything that would have created or attracted them. My wife and I were very worried and disgusted since we had never had that problem before. Maintenance had then left a trap for them, but she was concerned that it wasn't enough since we were still seeing them and was told that it just attracts them more. We were aware from Nancy that the last tenants weren't here for long. We would often hear stories from her about other tenants. Anyway, the pest issue was brought up to Nancy's attention the following day in person, and since we had just moved in, she had an exterminator come at their expense, whereas usually they said it's up to the tenant to pay for this sort of thing. So my wife was hesitant to put anything in the cabinets because of it just getting treated, and wanted to make sure that she wouldn't see any more, and has always been careful with any food or garbage. When my wife had mentioned to Nancy on the phone when speaking to her on Friday that delayed things a little with her putting things in cabinets at the time, she had then blamed us for bringing the bugs when we know we didn't. It seemed like this was being thrown right back in our faces, which really wasn't right or fair. There was also something unsettling about Nancy's look when she was told about the bugs before we left her office that day. If we were used to living with bugs, why would we even say anything? Anyway, Nancy also told my wife that our lease wouldn't be renewed at the same time they were talking about eviction. We want to mention this for the record since it's what we found out after moving in. On the second day, we had an appointment for Verizon and DirecTV to set up our services. When they were here, we found out that one of the 2 phone jacks were inoperable and that one of the TV hookups was also inoperable. The man from Verizon had told us that he thought it was someone from a TV company that had cut the wires. This has caused so much inconvenience with where to put our phone and our second TV, but the utility people had helped us as much as they could. The man from Verizon said that he knew Nancy and he would talk to her about it. We had also mentioned this to Nancy ourselves when we saw her in person regarding the bugs at the time that we learned when Verizon and DirecTV came to our home the day after moving that the lines were cut. There really wasn't any response and nothing was done that we know of. We only had one area in the home where we could use the landline phone. Thankfully, it's a multi-phone cordless. We didn't complain any further since we weren't really getting by with what we had and we didn't want to go through more trouble. Also, our bedroom rug was stained pretty good in certain areas the second day we lived here due to DirecTV and Verizon coming in and out of the mud and rain that day. We planned on trying to get the rug shampooed in October when the weather would be better for it to dry up. And that's when my wife had her injury and then everything came to a halt. My wife received a voicemail message from Nancy on Saturday morning asking that I can call her that day. She said Ron and her talked last night, and this has her so upset. They think it's a hoarding issue and will be bringing the code enforcement officer out. She said that she'll be calling him out on Monday to see what his schedule is, and he'll be giving you people today and tomorrow. She further said that she wants everything cleaned up, bags, boxes, everything, and the house better be spotless and look like we're living there, not like we're storing stuff there. She then went on to say that it's not a storage unit. She said that she'll be there with the code enforcement officer. Nancy then said that we'll be responsible for Ron's overtime with the furnace, and it was definitely because we let it go too long. Nancy then told me that Ron would be coming by later today. She wants both decks shoveled off and a path to the propane tank's driveway and sidewalks. She did say again about having me call her. Nancy also said that her and Ron would be coming back through on Monday so that he could check out the furnace, and that if the place wasn't cleaned up within these 48 hours that she would be filing at court and an eviction on our record. She's guessing this is why we were forced to leave the other place, which is not the case. Nancy then further said that she was so disappointed and never thought in a million years that 2 lovely people like ourselves would live like that she's so appalled and that she doesn't know what to do. She then went on to say that the couple next to us who are friends of hers that you could eat off their floors and that the homes are identical years. She then reiterated that Ron would be by later today and that I better have everything shoveled off like she said, and that her and Ron would be there Monday afternoon. She will then be calling code enforcement and bringing him through Tuesday or Wednesday. Nancy stressed again that every box, every bag better be cleaned up, and that the home better look like we're living there. Furniture and TV placed. She doesn't know what else to tell us, but that's how it is. The voicemail is available to forward if needed. Please note that this was all said by Nancy before actually seeing our residence. We were told at time of signing the lease that inspections are provided with a 7-day notice, and Nancy had also told my wife due to COVID they were not doing inspections. Having people constantly in our place with the rise in COVID cases was putting us at a greater risk. At around 12:30 p.m. on Monday, Nancy knocked hard at the door and then showed up with Ron and another maintenance person named Dave. I greeted them by saying hi, but received no response. Nancy immediately started looking around and saying things like, "Oh my God," several times, like this was the worst she's seen. Nancy had also been taking photos. She talked about us being out within 30 days again. We thought that we could have a rational conversation with Nancy and work towards a mutual agreement, since this issue was the first time being brought to our attention and asking for a reasonable opportunity to fix it. She kept saying no and wasn't listening. She again brought up the bugs that she said we brought here, asking if we enjoy living this way, and blaming my wife again for waiting before calling about the heating issue. My wife and I both have multiple health issues. In addition, my wife sustained a tibial plateau fracture in her left leg in October of 2021, and she had been on crutches until about mid-March. She needed physical therapy and was trying to receive that at home while waiting to hear from our insurance. She was also in the process of applying for disability. She has needed much of my help and care, and we were barely getting any sleep. And at the same time, my wife would need things to be out and easy to reach for her to use, which would make the place seem messier. She was unable to get into the shower and had to take baths using wipes. I had to take FMLA from my job for almost a month to help take care of her. She still had much added limitations due to her injury. Before her injury, she had a hard time getting around the way it is due to her physical disability. Nancy said how she was nervous about the fire in NYC over the weekend due to space heaters and that we couldn't keep them in the home after Tuesday. There was also nothing we could find in the lease stating that the space heaters are not allowed. If not, then all residents need to be told they can't have them, and we shouldn't have been singled out. And also the maintenance men should also not be telling residents they could have them. Please note that while I did shovel the night before, the path to the propane tanks was the only area not shoveled yet. I did do this on Saturday, which was within the 36-hour rule, and I only saw other residents had shoveled their decks, sidewalks, and driveways. Ron came that morning, but not later in the day like Nancy said he would. There didn't seem to be any reason for him to return again that day, as we were provided with adequate heat from the space heaters at the time. There's a sign posted near the mailboxes about how tenants could be evicted for not shoveling in time. This is not in the lease, however. If there were any questions about our previous rental place, this wasn't addressed by Nancy with us until now. She still agreed to rent to us, and she did have all the prior information. We have never been evicted before, and we lived in our previous residence for 6 years. We learned from Nancy when we first applied that there was someone else in mind, but they had failed a background check, so we were next in line, the second choice. I wasn't able to return Nancy's call on Saturday, and I knew that it would just likely lead to more arguing if I did speak with her. From what I understood, she just wanted to know my work schedule. My wife could have given this to her without my need to call. She could have called me herself too. I also didn't appreciate the way that she spoke to my wife. We're human beings, not pieces of garbage. We paid the rent on time each month. We would only call when needed, and we hadn't been problem tenants during our time there. At no time since moving there had we been given any notice about our place needing to be cleaned up until now. Sunday turned out to be an ice storm, and there were freezing temperatures all weekend. It was really hard to meet the short time frame and unrealistic expectations given to us verbally. It would still have been difficult for us as we had the help of a moving company when we came here, along with my wife's physical disabilities and recent injury on top of that. I helped my wife with a lot, but I'm only one person. I emailed Nancy on Sunday apologizing for not getting back to her on Saturday. She replied back on Monday, stating that her and Ron would be there that afternoon. No time was specified. I replied back asking what time, and she said 12:30 p.m., which was only about half hour beforehand, and she had asked if the place was cleaned up. I had no time to respond. I needed to let my wife know, who was still resting in bed, as it normally takes her a while to get ready due to physical limitations. We would have appreciated more advance notice of them coming, but I guess we didn't deserve any type of courtesy. I had still been working, and I don't check my personal email constantly throughout the day. I'm still not sure why Nancy had asked for my work schedule. I thought given the hours she would have worked around my work schedule. I have a defined schedule with 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch break. Ron and Dave couldn't fix the issue when they came Monday, and they said they would need to call an electrician who would be coming on Tuesday. Nancy said that if he couldn't fix the heating, that we would need to go to a motel at our expense, that or stay with my mom, that the water would be shut off. Meanwhile, we still pay for rent, propane, electricity, as well as landline and internet. My wife was trying to say across the house as we were walking out the door with our masks on. So does that mean this house is garbage and should be thrown away because they can't fix the furnace and then we have to leave immediately? She meant that as it doesn't make sense for us to have to get out because they have to fix a furnace and then threaten to turn off the water. Nancy told my wife that she has a problem. Please note that my mom is down as an emergency contact. So is my mother-in-law. To stay at my mom's home would not have been a feasible option, especially on such short notice, and staying at a motel wouldn't have worked either. It should also be noted that emergency contacts shouldn't be expected to be relied upon for housing. Before leaving, Nancy said we would receive a letter by the end of the day about eviction. We did receive an email, which stated that the repair person would be coming on Tuesday between 10:30 to 11 a.m. to hopefully repair the furnace. Another inspection will be following Tuesday at 1 p.m. with code enforcement, and if not in an acceptable condition, we will be given until March 1st to vacate the home, and that if the furnace couldn't be repaired, we would need to move out immediately. How nice. We were still paying a full month's rent in our utilities, though we would need to find somewhere to stay in the dead of winter at our own expense while my wife tries getting around on crutches. It was already hard for her to get around prior to her injury, but who cares about that, right? The only time she was out since her injury was for medical appointments. Nancy came by after 5 p.m. to the home on Monday, and I met her at the front door where she personally handed me the email that she had already sent. She then reiterated a lot of the information already sent in the email, and she said that she guessed this was the reason that we had to leave the last place. Nancy also said that she will not tolerate the way that we're living. She told me that she had made some phone calls that afternoon. I told her that we weren't evicted. She said that her regional manager Kyle was appalled by the photos. Nancy then told me that my wife has issues. I told her that I didn't appreciate her saying this, and that she needs to watch the way she speaks to people. I asked her if she would like to tell my wife this herself, but she declined. My wife had heard the whole conversation from the bedroom anyway. Nancy said my wife had made accusations about her. We do not know what she's even referring to. I also didn't care as I had already knew everything that went on, and I stood by my wife. I learned that after moving to this community that Nancy has a reputation of being two-faced, and that she also evicts people within a short amount of time. This information could be found on Facebook. We really didn't want to believe such statements, but obviously the posts on social media about Nancy and this company proved to be correct over time. We were grateful for the chance to be able to rent there from the start, since finding a rental that would meet our needs was really difficult at that time. We needed a place with everything on the first floor. Nancy allowed us some time in the place before signing a lease and paying rent. She even gave us the contact information for the business who cuts her grass, which we then hired. If we only knew what we later learned, we would have never gone there. From what we know, Nancy has only been to our place this once since we started renting here in April of 2021. We had asked if she would be walking around with us to show us the home and things like that, but she said no. She didn't show us the home before we signed the lease. We were given a key to see it ourselves beforehand, which seemed odd. Other places we rented would walk around with us and show us things initially. My wife and I are good people. We never stopped being the lovely people that Nancy met. We have clean records and we don't look for trouble. We don't think it's fair for our character to be defamed and to be made out to be someone we're not. We were referred to as hoarders by Nancy. She barely even knew us. We admit that the place didn't look normal and we were doing what we could to improve this matter. We were not enjoying anything about this, and quite frankly, we were very embarrassed. We had plans in place to get our boxes and bags cleared up by the fall, but we had some setbacks. Shortly after moving, my wife applied for disability, and we became victims of identity fraud, which it took some time to work through. It was also an unusually warm summer to be bringing items back and forth to a storage unit, but I suppose these are looked at as invalid excuses. What excuse is there, however, for the way we were treated and spoken to? I'm sure that we're not the only ones who've had hardships in our lives, but I guess if you do, then you can't live in this community. At least that is the way we were made to feel, like we didn't deserve to be there. I guess that meant that we didn't deserve to have any heat either. We thought the point of Nancy coming and looking at our place would be to have a rational discussion. not be scorned, especially without having a working heating system. She had offered no resources or remedies that would possibly assist us with cleaning our place up, although I know of other tenants that she's helped when they're in a jam. Items were more out of place because of my wife being on crutches and needing easy access to reach and get our things as best as she could without having to ask for assistance every time. We really don't understand where all of the hatred was coming from. We felt judged, labeled, harassed, threatened, insulted, demeaned, and gaslighted to the point of this being one of the most traumatic experiences we've ever had to deal with, living in constant fear. We were always respectful towards Nancy whenever we needed to contact her, which wasn't often, and we never thought badly of her until all this happened. If I would pass by the office while taking a walk and see her, I would wave or say hi. We didn't feel like we were giving her an attitude even as she was tearing us apart right in front of her staff. Nancy acted very unprofessional, subjective, and I find it hard to believe that this company condones her behavior. If so, then that's a major problem. But I guess they must condone it because we never even got an apology for what we had to go through. Gee, thanks. We deserved all this. We've never been spoken to that way before by anyone. Like I said, this company, according to social media, has a bad reputation. Again, we wish that we had more time to research things before we had agreed to come there. We were being compared to other residents, especially friends of hers. This was not right nor fair. Plus, I didn't think in her position that she could be friends with the current tenants of the community that she oversees. Do these folks get special treatment? We needed to be able to function on a daily basis, but found that the stress from the situation made our lives extremely difficult. This would have only put us in a worse situation, especially when things were already bad enough with our health issues, as well as the rise in COVID cases in the winter months. It's not stated anywhere in the lease that no boxes or bags are permitted, nor how furniture should be positioned. We didn't have debris. We feel as though we're supposed to live according to one person's personal preferences, and that rules are just made up as time goes on. We didn't realize life here was supposed to be like the Stepford Wives. Anyway, on Wednesday, the heating system appeared to still not be working properly and seemed worse, making weird noises that didn't sound good and leaving an off odor which seemed similar to exhaust through the ear vents and also close near the machine. My wife didn't feel comfortable contacting Nancy again due to the way we were spoken to and treated. She contacted Kyle the same day about Nancy's behavior and also to report the heating issue yet again. He did say that he would pass the information on to Nancy and my wife would hear back from her, but also stated that we would still have to work with her. So we were being forced to still work with the same person who just recently tore us apart. He also said that he saw the pictures, and then he reiterated to us about getting our place cleaned up. Kyle told my wife that she had waited for days before calling about the heating issue. He also told my wife that she had misread the email sent by Nancy that we would have to move immediately if the furnace wasn't fixed. He said that we would have to leave immediately if we didn't have the kitchen cleared up for them to come fix it, which didn't really make sense, and we know that's not what it said. Please note that Kyle was only going off what Nancy told him. His demeanor was more professional than Nancy, but still cold. My wife did not wait days before reporting the issue. We wanted to give it a little time before reporting the issue to Nancy, just to make sure that it wasn't something that would resolve on its own. The only one saying the issue with the heating system not working because we waited too long was Nancy. None of the maintenance men were saying that was the problem, and I think they would know better than her. I mean, how could she know this for certain? Even if we did wait several days before reporting the issue, it doesn't take away the landlord's responsibility to fix the heating system and then pin the problems on the tenants. But I suppose that's easy to do, and one of the ways landlords in this state get away with so much shit. As of Thursday, we didn't receive any phone calls, messages, or emails, and needed to utilize the space heaters. We weren't really sure if this was a form of retaliation from Nancy since we went above her and had asked her to stop harassing us, or if it was something from Kyle and if he relayed the message to her. But we didn't feel comfortable with either of them since it seemed like they were making it look like my wife doesn't have an idea of what she's talking about, or has some kind of mental disorder and keeps being blamed for everything that transpires. My wife and I ended up hiring an attorney as we felt we had no other alternative but to move out. He reassured us that we could stay until the end of our lease and that we were able to have boxes and bags. From what he told us, the landlord was the one acting illegally, not us, yet we were the ones needed to vacate. The lawyer had sent a cease and desist letter to Nancy as well as her company via fax and mail. It was on a Friday, now a week since my wife first called Nancy that she emailed Kyle to let him know that we hadn't heard from Nancy, and she was also copied on the email. Monday of the following week, my wife received a response from Nancy with what appeared to be an email reply to Kyle, stating that she didn't get any calls from us over the weekend. She did get other calls, and it makes me wonder if she talked to them the way she did to my wife when we had initially called. On Tuesday, Nancy came with the maintenance men, no code officer. But the first thing she asked is if we have no heat. She evidently never got her boss's message and actually apologized. She was like a completely different person compared to the other week. She didn't look around like previously. The main focus was the furnace not working, as it really should have been all along. They thought they had it working before leaving, but my wife had to call her back later in the day, and she was actually pleasant to her this time. They had someone come in on Wednesday, and then got the heating system up and running finally. I believe his name was Tony, and he had asked me if we had regular issues with the lights flickering in our residence, which I confirmed we did. About a week later, we'd received a letter taped to our screen door stating that our lease would not be renewed after April 30th. It seemed like Nancy and her disciples were playing a dangerous game that could have affected our safety and put us in even more danger or a bad situation. It was in the middle of January still, in the midst of a pandemic at its worst numbers, and it was during one of the weeks with the coldest temperatures. We needed to be able to stay there at least until the end of our lease and prevent an eviction to be on our record, since we're hoping to purchase a home in the near future. We also didn't want a bad record for us to be able to get another rental if needed. We felt that we didn't deserve the extent of this punishment. We have not had much, if any, contact with Nancy after the heat was fixed. Since she never apologized for the way she overreacted and the way she spoke to us, we wanted as little contact with her as possible until our lease ended. There was one day when I was taking a walk during one of my afternoon breaks when Nancy came out from the office towards the mailboxes near where I was walking and then just asked, "Hey, how are you doing?" I asked the same thing, and that was really the extent of it. I continued on my walk. I normally walk during my work breaks. It was in mid-April when I was taking a walk and was stopped by Nancy, who asked if we had found a place to live. I said yes, and that we would be moving on 2 different dates. She asked how long we would need until, and I told her through April 30th, the last day of our lease. Nancy told me that she got a call from a place for a reference, and she told them that we always pay our rent on time. She then asked that we call her to schedule our walkthrough inspection when we're ready. I told her I would let my wife know. Just a few minutes later, Nancy was near the mailboxes outside of the office. I was caught off guard the way she confronted me, as if she went out of her way to catch me on my walk just to ask about our situation. We thought if she did have any questions that she would have sent an email or called, not just approach me on the street. But I guess I shouldn't have been surprised considering the way this place operates. We then made arrangements to have our lawn mowed and weeds pulled one last time. We left the payment in an envelope attached to our back door for the business who cuts our grass as we normally would, since they were supposed to come a couple of days later. However, the check was gone. My wife had contacted the business owner to see if he had picked up the check, and he advised that Nancy actually took it and called him to let him know that she has it and will give it to him. She was afraid that someone might take it. My wife told him that was odd, and he agreed. Nothing else was said to us. This was our money. The business did end up getting the check and completing the service, but the lack of communication is concerning. We're not really sure what Nancy was doing there in person to begin with, since she knew that we needed until the end of the month to finish. My wife and I had 2 moving dates before finally setting in our new place. We cleaned it to the best of our ability, and I think the end result came out well. All we needed was more time, which was not on our side months ago. As I said, a lot had transpired during May to October 2021 in our lives, but landlords don't seem to care about that. We were being kicked while we were already down. After we were done cleaning out our old place, my wife had left a voicemail for Nancy to advise her that we were done, that we would be unable to do a walkthrough inspection and the keys were left inside. She also informed her that any type of correspondence could be sent to the old address as we were having our mail forwarded. We did end up having to provide our new address, however. We received our security deposit minus $127.20 for shampooing of the carpets. It's not actually outlined in the lease that this is needed to be done upon leaving. We made sure the carpeting was cleaned as much as possible, but evidently not to our former place's standards. The washer and dryer hookups leaked water. This was noticed as they were initially put in, then by the person who took our washer and dryer. There's evidently a lot of issues, as we had mentioned, yet we were still paying a full month's rent for 12 months. We just kept getting screwed over. We waited until after we moved and received our security deposit before filing a complaint. We feared retaliation while still living there. Since moving to our new place though, we haven't had any problems. I can't believe the way we were treated, and I'm so glad we're out of there. But the trauma is still at the back of our minds. My advice to anyone looking to rent is to do your homework thoroughly about the people in charge and the company itself. You might just save yourself a lot of unnecessary grief in the long run. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always